Let's talk about property rights then, because funny enough, there was this guy from Hong Kong who runs a big metaverse company that taught me about property rights. That was you, and how they're inextricably linked into democracy and capitalism, and then also having a stake in our future. And it's something that's easy to forget, especially in the digital world where we don't really understand that we have those property rights. But I was curious if you could talk about what we've seen now in America, where you almost have this anti-capitalistic narrative, which is kind of fascinating to see, and it really perturbs the older people because
it's shocking, actually. It's shocking.
It is shocking. It's hard to understand, and I think you have a theory on what's happening there,
Yeah.
and also quite a different narrative in Asia, and also kind of regulations that maybe mirror
Absolutely,
those
and I
things.
think this is very different when you look at Asia or Middle East versus what's happening in the U.S. So, I mean, you know, in the context of the U.S., I think let's just sort of bring up sort of, you know, founding fathers, right? I mean, George Washington specifically said that property rights and freedom, you know, basically are absolutely interlinked, right? You can't have one without the other. And this is also true for the digital realm. It's the same thing. Property rights are a foundation for this. But why is it a foundation for this? Well, it's a foundation for this because of the fact that when you have the freedom to really own something, then you have the freedom to transact. You have the freedom to do whatever you want with it. And only one level of transaction means I can trade with it. That's one level of abstraction. But the other areas is that when I own something, nobody else can come in and take it away from me, which also means an intermediary, a third party, can come and say, oh, you happen to own this item, maybe this house or this car. I have something I can do to your car because it's no longer owned by the company that created it. It's owned by you. Let me give you a paint job for your car. You don't like that red color? I'll make it silver, I'll make it blue. And you just created a relationship and a job. And again, that service element, by the way, that network effect that was created from that person who gave you value to the car might give value to other cars in the same manner. What happens to the object, the car that you own? It's more valuable to you. And the utility of the car expanded from, you know, beyond a transportation device to something that makes you feel good, or to something that expresses you, for instance, right? There are thousands of companies that are now in existence because we own cars. There are thousands of companies in existence because we can own our phones. Like you can buy headphones and you can get phone cases. There are, you know, myriads of companies that provide services because you own a house. For instance, from furniture, from art, you know, from banking services, right? If we didn't have property rights, you can't do any of that stuff. There's also no capital formation with property rights because I can't invest. If I don't own something, then I can't really put value into it for the long term. If I know I own this, I can invest with a 20-year, 30-year business plan. If I own my real estate, I can build a restaurant, I can build a business, knowing that this is mine and I can invest in it. Just think about when you own a house, how you think about renovating your own house versus a rental home. I mean, that's a feeling, but it's fact, right? You are never going to invest as much money into that. And that's the paradigm. So you have basically capital formation. The countries, this is already very well studied. All the countries that have very strong property rights, physical property rights, have very high GDPs. The US, or Hong Kong, you know, Singapore, the UK, right? And the countries that have no property rights, North Korea, or low property rights, many sort of, you know, African or sort of certain South American countries as well.
Where they don't even know if their property will be there next year because somebody might take it.
Well, because the government either takes it or the government is overthrown.
Right.
I think another thing that a lot of people don't understand is how property rights works, particularly the youth. Because they think of, I live in this house, it's physical, therefore it's real. But the ownership of this house is not made real because of the bricks it's built on. It's made real because of a virtual contract that is the Constitution in America, or it's contract law in other places around the world. It's the government that enables it. Because if that government disappears, that house you think you own, you don't own either. So our actual physical rights and ownership are virtual constructs upheld by people who we elected, which is a democratic system as well. If you have a monarch, or you have a despot, or you have basically someone who has sort of dictatorial powers, they get to decide whether you can own it or not. And it's not something that you can change. And so while it may appear that he's a benevolent dictator, so it may work for a little while, but he might die, right? As they don't live forever. A new person comes in with that kind of central power. We do not know whether this person will change. So how do you ensure that safety? This is where things like a democratic framework, where things like a constitution start to come in, because you have a framework that you respect. And I think the war, if you want to call it, that sort of ideological war that's happening in the US, is very much a war on how people interpret the Constitution. And it comes, unfortunately, on the back of, I think, politics in terms of how you get elected, not necessarily what's right for the country in many cases. The irony is that the rest of the world still aspires to American ideas, right? They may not necessarily agree what's happening in America, but the American idea of property rights and liberty and freedom is actually what other countries want. Asia, for instance, is actually a place where, you know, capitalism is thriving. There is inequity, but because in living memory, people are actually better off than they were before because of a capitalist framework, because of the introduction of property rights. Most people don't remember or even know that South Korea in the early 80s had a lower GDP than North Korea. They introduced property rights, capitalism, democracy, and today, 12th or 13th largest country by GDP. Right? I mean, this is an example. We're talking about 80s. We were born in the 80s or 70s, right? We remember those times, and our families experienced that. That's why they believe in this. But when you look at sort of American youth, and they look at that and they say, well, first of all, capitalism hasn't worked for them.
Right.
And, you know, zero interest and all that kind of stuff, inflation, have all sort of played a hand in this. But the other thing, of course, is that they don't exactly study how property rights works. They don't understand the benefits of you know, capitalism in the same way, and they also take it for granted.
Yeah.
Right? Because they've always had it. I mean, the sort of the concern that you would lose your property or that you know what it's like not to have it is not a couple generations away. It's hundreds of years away, right? Nobody in America would fear that if I bought this house, I might not have it. Right? Yeah. And you see this expression in immigrant societies. So for instance, one of the most predominant immigrant societies, if not the most sort of predominant one, is Chinese, specifically Chinese diaspora, right? Because of the wars, because of the Civil War, because of everything, they spread all over the world. And, you know, whether it's a Chinatown here, it's a community there are more overseas Chinese than there are people in France. Right? I mean, that just gives you an idea of the strength of the diaspora. And of course, you have other diaspora like Japanese and whatever, right? And one of the things that they always obsess about is property, buying real estate. Why? Because they can't have it back home when they left the country. It's so embedded in the culture because of the uncertainty in which they were sort of removed from. Whereas if you are an incumbent, you were living in this country, you're just fine. So there, I don't care, right? And I remember I grew up in Austria, so in the Germanic-speaking region, and I remember actually more so in Germany than in Austria, because they were so comfortable with the rights of ownership. Most people just were renting. So Berlin, for instance, still has, I don't know what it is now, but back literally just 10 years ago, I think home ownership was under 20%. Because everyone's like, well, you know, why should I own a property? What's the point? Let me just rent, right? But of course, what happens, and this is the problem about sort of what happens in a capital society, which still Germany ultimately still capitalist, right? Is that owning stuff appreciates in value, and has basically sort of growth potential because of framework of equity and capital versus labor, which has stayed largely flat. In fact, if you sort of put real labor, the wage values from a decade or two ago, it's actually come down, right? Because of the zero cost of capital, because of inflation. So that means that as a labor worker, you are now making less money than in real terms than you were making a decade ago. You can no longer afford that house. You can no longer even rent that house that perhaps your parents could have.
So Jim Rickards has just recorded a video that's not available to anyone in the public, and he's going to be talking about how this upcoming recession is going to be fast, it's going to be bloody, it's going to be nasty. But at the same time, he's going to show you how you can position yourself to profit from all of this chaos. Now, we've made this video only available to our viewers. Go to londonreal.tv/Jim. Watch that immediately. I can't say enough good things about Jim Rickards. He understands the global economic system better than any guest I've ever had on London Real. His predictions are almost uncannily true, and you can learn how to profit from his vision, from his expertise, and his understanding of economics. So go to londonreal.tv/Jim or click the link below. It's an excellent, excellent look on what's going to happen in the future and how you can position yourself to profit from that. Jim is one of the best in the business, one of my favorite guests on London Real, and he's very, very good at predicting the future and showing us all to profit from it. So click the link, and I hope you enjoy.
I'm looking for partners, collaborators, colleagues who want to join forces with me around the globe and create real value, generational wealth, and financial freedom for everyone else around the world. Get involved in the cryptocurrency markets, get involved in the NFT markets. This is your moment. Life all comes down to a few moments. Don't let this pass. Now it's not too late. Next year's going to be too late. Ultimately, this is about freedom. That's the way I see it. This is about giving power back to the people and enabling billions of people worldwide to use the financial markets to improve their lives and those of their friends and their families and their communities. Honestly, I think it's a violation of human rights not to allow people basic access to financial services. Because right now people are being kept in the dark, they're being robbed of education, and it's a travesty. And so I'm looking for people that want to join me and be a part of this solution. And that all happens inside the DeFi Academy. The gains my students are making are absolutely amazing. Double, triple-digit gains in the first month alone. That's amazing. This will change your life. Now is the time to get involved. I'm going to tell you exactly how my students in my academy made money in the last 30 days. I'm talking about real trading results. And let me just whet your appetite a little bit. Let me hit you with some numbers. I'm talking Brendan from New Zealand is up 68.77% on the month. Steve from Europe up 83%. Albert in Singapore up 169.9% on one single trade. I got Susan up 153% on her call options alone. Also rocking 139% returns and 442% returns as well on individual trades. These are people that are changing their financial future in the last 30 days, but it's based on trading discipline.
I've graduated over 500 students from inside my academy from over 54 countries around the world. It's amazing. When it comes to crypto, DeFi, and blockchain, we love this space. We truly believe it's the future. This is down to our core. It's authentic to what we're doing, and everybody can tell through the camera because you can't make this stuff up. If you're watching me now, wherever you are, I implore you, take 60 seconds right now and join my academy. Apply today. Now you've got a chance. Life all comes down to a few moments. What are you going to do? What's the choice that you're going to make?